President Trump with a message to anti-Iranian regime protesters. This as he's taking his economic message on the road, speaking at the Detroit Economic Club. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu, who is in Detroit. So Mari, good afternoon. What is the latest from President Trump's remarks there?
Don, good afternoon. Yes, that's right. It was a very wide-ranging speech as usual, clocking in at a little bit over an hour. And President Trump is now reiterating what he was weighing in on Truth Social about this morning, escalating his threats to Iran, telling anti-Iranian regime protesters to keep going and that help is on its way. This is coming as protests in Iran have escalated and grown over the past few weeks. And now a U.S.-based human rights agency is reporting that there are now 2,000 deaths, 2,000 protester deaths. However, other reports are saying that medical officials think that the death toll is actually somewhere between 12,000 and at the high end 20,000. Authorities actually don't know. It's really difficult to tell since the internet has been blocked off since last Thursday. This is something that a billionaire Elon Musk is trying to now remedy, offering free Starlink in Iran as blackouts there persist. And President Trump's been repeatedly issuing strong warnings to Iran over the past few weeks, saying that if the regime kills peaceful protesters, that the United States will come to their rescue. Just a couple weeks ago, he said that the U.S. is locked and loaded and ready to go. And this is what he has to say today. Watch.
And by the way, to all Iranian patriots, keep protesting, take over your institutions if possible, and save the name of the killers and the abusers that are abusing you. You're being very badly abused. If the numbers are right now, I hear 5 different sets of numbers. I hear numbers, look, 1 death is too much. But I hear much lower numbers, and then I hear much higher numbers. But I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price. Then I've canceled all meetings with the Iranian officials until the senseless killing of protesters stops. And all I say to them is help is on its way. You saw that I put tariffs on anybody doing business with Iran. Just went into effect today.
Meanwhile, President Trump is strongly defending his tariff strategy here in Motor City as a national security strategy, warning of a crisis if the Supreme Court rules against his tariffs. Take a look.
Now, an anti-tariff person is a pro-Chinese person. Like the Trump tariffs have delivered us trillions of dollars of new investment, unprecedented new partnerships on minerals, rare earths, defense, and artificial intelligence, and historic levels of foreign military sales. You know, you have the Supreme Court now going to rule on whether or not we can use tariffs. Can you believe this? A case brought about by people that are China-centric, foreign-centric, but China-centric. I wouldn't want it if I was China either. You know, China's one of our biggest taxpayers right now. China.
Have you ever allowed Chinese autos into the U.S.?
Well, as you know, we have a tariff on Chinese autos, and in Europe, China's taking over the auto business, I would say is a nice statement, but that's the way it is. And here, what is it, 100%? We have 100% tariff on any car coming in from China.
And this is all coming, of course, as President Trump announced last week that he wants to ban all large institutional investors from buying single-family homes, calling on Congress to codify that. Last week, he also announced that he's ordering his representatives to purchase $200 billion in mortgage bonds, adding that this aims to make the cost of owning a home more affordable for Americans. And now President Trump today says that he'll have more housing-related announcements to make next week, where he'll be attending and making remarks at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. So we'll be looking out for that. Don, back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you for the report.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and this is NTD Newsroom. Thank you for joining us today. You were just watching President Trump and his remarks at the Detroit Economic Club, touting his achievements on the U.S. economy in his past year, saying that the U.S. is seeing the strongest and fastest economic turnaround with $18 trillion invested into the U.S. due to tariffs. And he contrasted that with the Biden administration, saying that Biden had less than $1 trillion of investment into the U.S. and noting that it is over a 4-year period, whereas President Trump's investment of $18 trillion is over a 1-year period. And also saying that he had stock market highs. He says inflation is defeated, wages are growing, wages growing over $1,000, 401ks are growing as well due to the stock market highs. And he says this often, he said it again today, hottest country in the world, greatest first year in history based on a number. He says this is not based on him, but this is based on the numbers. Okay, we're going to discuss this further. Joining us now is Brian Leib, political strategist and foreign policy analyst, as well as the CEO of Henry Public Relations. Okay, so good to see you again. First off, can we get your reactions here, Brian, on the message that President Trump gave at this event?
Yeah, sure, Don. Good afternoon, and hello to the NTD audience. President Trump's hour-long message here was very vintage President Trump. He hit all of the right points and also interjected a lot of his personal commentary, shall we say, into the speech. But I think, what we heard the president talk about over and over and over again is that, our economy is firing on all cylinders right now. The tariffs that we've been bringing in from other countries are really at record highs right now. So, we are, as the president says, we're the hottest country out there right now when it comes to doing business and finding a place to invest in. And we heard that again from the president. So I think it was a fantastic speech, well received, pitch perfect as always.
Okay, so what is President Trump doing that has led to this economic growth over 4%, the last numbers that we got for the GDP, and contrast that with previous administrations?
Well, in contrast to previous administrations, what President Trump has done is he's reduced a lot of the red tape and a lot of the restrictions and regulations on businesses. And I think that's very important for two reasons. One, to actually do it in the first place is a good thing. But two, it also sends a message. It's more of an optics thing. When small businesses feel that they can start their business without having to jump through 15 different hoops, when nonprofits and other organizations, feel that they can expand and they can grow because there's not a lot of regulations on them, it's good. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, consumer confidence continues to rise. I think the American people are definitely doing better than we were a year ago. And also, I think a big part of that, Don, is the president's tariff strategy. It's bringing in not just hundreds of millions of dollars. We're talking about billions of dollars that have been coming into the economy, which is really, again, it helps our economy, helps us pay down some of that deficit. But I think it also is more of a mental thing, and it makes us as the American people feel that our economy is doing well, and it is.
Yeah, and President Trump, on the topic of deregulation, I mean, even I was surprised by the numbers that he gave. He said for every regulation that he added, he cut 129, I think was the number he said exactly, which is quite surprising. He said he would do 10, but it's actually 10 times that and more. So, I mean, that alone, I think, surprised me. Can we also ask you about what you think about tariffs? You mentioned that already a little bit, but what exactly were the impacts? And if the Supreme Court strikes down tariffs, what would be the impact of that as well?
I don't think the Supreme Court, just my personal opinion, I don't think they're going to be striking down the tariffs. I mean, what President Trump is doing is he's doing what any other president had their presidential right and presidential power to do, but President Trump is the only one that had the courage to do it, and more so, he's a deal maker, so he's making deals and he's using the tariff as strategy to increase investment coming into this country. So I think the tariffs overall have really been an essential part of the president's economic strategy. And there's a lot of other things at play too, but the tariffs really are important. And when the president is using that to bring in foreign investment to our country, it's a big tool in his toolbox that he has to use, and a lot of other presidents haven't used it like he is.
Okay, I want to ask you about another topic that President Trump brought up in his message. just now. He said promoting greater affordability is on the top of the list in his agenda of America First. So some numbers he gave: grocery prices starting to come down, rent is down, gas is down. He's citing 197, 195, 199 per gallon in some areas, as well. Drug prices down by 600% in some cases. He says that they should win the midterms on this alone, talking about the most favored nation pricing. But how do you look at a Gallup poll from last month that showed nearly half of U.S. adults, about 47% now, describe current economic conditions as poor? It's up 7% since November.
You know, you can poll someone and poll a group, based on, a whole wider range of different questions and different conditions. So I tend not to put too much credence in the polls, to be honest with you, Don. But I think, listen, we have to be honest with ourselves, and, whether you're, part of the top 10% earners in this country or you're not, I think everyone is feeling that things are more expensive. That's not necessarily something specific to us, the American people. Things are more expensive everywhere you go, anywhere around the world. But affordability is important, and for families that have been struggling to make ends meet, put food on the table. The fact that rent payments and things are going up is not helpful. But President Trump, you just cited a couple different categories where the prices are down. That helps, but we definitely do have an affordability issue, in this country, and in terms of families being able to buy homes and rent increasing. I think, listen, I'm bullish on our economy. I'm bullish on our future as a country, and I think that we still have 3 more years of President Trump, and the things that he's been able to do in just a year has been remarkable. So let's see what he can do in 3 more years.
Okay, Brian, we would also love to hear your comments on President Trump bringing multiple ceasefires and peace deals. It wasn't a focus of the economic club speech, but, it's a big development that has potential impacts on the economy. Nevertheless, he arrested Venezuelan dictator Maduro, and he's vowing serious support for Iranians. How much do you think this could play into the midterms, in addition to the economy?
Well, listen, foreign policy is typically not even in the top 5 of issues that an American voter cares about. But with that said, it definitely is important, and I think it's getting a lot of attention. And what President Trump has been doing on the world stage has been remarkable. The operation that we carried out in Venezuela was nothing short of remarkable. And at the end of the day, we've got to stand with people that are being oppressed. It doesn't mean that we have to be the world police, but it means that, in my opinion, I think that we should stand with people that are being oppressed. So if it's the Venezuelan people that have been living, under a dictatorship, whether sometimes it's the Chinese people living under the CCP's regime, and also in Tehran with the Iranian people. So I think. I think we don't have to be the world police when it comes to actually sending boots on the ground, but we need to step up and help people when they need help.
Okay, so just finally, the president on stage encouraged Iranian protesters to take over their institutions. He said the U.S. will come to their aid. What could having such overt support from the U.S. president mean to protesters in Iran?
Well, based on what I'm hearing and seeing, it is the ultimate game changer, to be honest with you. At this point, I don't even think President Trump is going to have to do anything from a military perspective for there to be regime change. He put 25% tariffs just the other day on any country doing business with Iran. He's been doing a lot of other things overtly, covertly, from an economic perspective to really bring this regime to their knees. But when you have the leader of the free world and President Trump telling the Iranian people to keep going, keep fighting, that we stand with you, that's huge for the Iranian people. They've never had that before. So it's in a sense it's a fuel for them that keeps them going, and it also continues to send a message to the mullahs in Tehran and the Khomeini regime that their time is very limited at this point. So we'll see what happens. But as I said, there could be a scenario here, Don, where in the next who knows, hours, days, maybe even a week, this regime could fall, and it could all fall just based on what President Trump has done from an economic perspective and what he has done from a messaging perspective. And I mean, of course, it's the Iranian people that are driving this regime change that might happen. But wouldn't that be something if this regime falls without the U.S. having to do anything from a military perspective? Could be possible.
Yeah, a number of guests that I've spoken to in recent days have said that it's entirely a possibility that it is close to falling. Well, Brian, really enjoyed speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Don. Have a good day.
December's inflation report is in, and it looked a lot like November's. This could be inching inflation closer to the Fed's target. That's the question. The latest number ahead from the Labor Department. Iranian activists are calling on foreign leaders to support people protesting the Islamic regime. How international organizations are reacting to the ongoing violence. More news after this break.
That truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
A sign of economic relief as inflation cooled slightly last month. The latest Labor Department data shows consumer prices rose 0.3% in December from the month prior, the same as November. Increases at this pace over time would bring inflation closer to the Fed's 2% target. Many economists had expected inflation to jump last month after the government resumed normal data collecting after its 6-week shutdown. Many Americans are still feeling the pinch, though, after recent years of large price increases on necessities like utilities, rent, and groceries. And last month, grocery prices jumped 0.7% in December from the previous month, a sign that food costs remain high. The Trump administration is ending temporary protected status for thousands of Somalis in the United States. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says they'll be required to leave by March 17th. In a statement to Fox News today, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said, quote, "Temporary means temporary." She added that country conditions in Somalia have improved to the point that it no longer meets the law's requirement for temporary protected status. She also said allowing Somali nationals to remain temporarily in the U.S. is contrary to the nation's interests. Trump said in November that he was terminating deportation protections for Somalis living in Minnesota. The decision comes as federal authorities investigate reports of widespread fraud in the state. The Department of Homeland Security is facing legal challenges over immigration enforcement in Minnesota. The state is suing the Trump administration over ICE deployments. The lawsuit comes amid protests following the fatal shooting of a woman by an ICE agent. Here's more.
Minnesota is suing the federal government over a surge in ICE agents to the Twin Cities. The state is calling it unconstitutional and unlawful. The lawsuit names Secretary Kristi Noem and alleges DHS is targeting Minnesota for political reasons.
We allege that the obvious targeting of Minnesota for our diversity, for our democracy, and our differences of opinion with the federal government is a violation of the Constitution and of federal law.
The department is pushing back, saying immigration and customs enforcement is federal law enforcement and belongs everywhere that federal law applies. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons told Fox News yesterday that ICE is present in all 50 states, and law enforcement in states like Texas and Florida cooperate with ICE instead of opposing it.
If we have ICE agents or deportation officers that are being harassed and impeded, their state law enforcement, local law enforcement actually comes to the aid of ICE, not turn down our 911 calls, not show up to a protest. You know, we only are increasing our numbers because ICE agents are getting attacked due to the lax policies that Minnesota has.
Lyons also said that Minnesota is a sanctuary state.
They don't honor our detainers, and they release criminals back into the neighborhood.
In a press release yesterday, DHS said ICE has removed child abusers, drug traffickers, and domestic violence perpetrators from Minnesota's streets. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin said the department will not let rioters or sanctuary politicians slow it down from arresting and removing the worst of the worst in Minnesota.
Illinois also unveiled a lawsuit yesterday. It accuses the administration of creating turmoil and imposing a climate of fear in the state and in the city of Chicago. And an update on alleged widespread fraud in Minnesota in an exclusive interview with Blaze TV. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says investigators have uncovered schemes far larger than expected, with illegally obtained taxpayer funds sent to overseas locations. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the key takeaways from Bessent's interview.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Minnesota has become a blueprint for uncovering similar fraud nationwide.
The American people are the most generous people in the world. You just can't take advantage of us. When immigrants come here, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on, customs and laws to follow, and that you cannot steal from the U.S. government the way you did from your government.
Bessent says fraudsters have set up an organized scheme to game the system.
Benefits have been turned into businesses. It is a cottage industry of teaching people how to form multiple LLCs, how to game the system, how to move money around, and we'll see where the money goes.
The Treasury Secretary raised concerns about what he calls massive leakage of public assistance funds leaving the country.
If you are on public assistance and you are sending money out of the country, one of two things must be true. You are getting too much assistance because you have excess funds to feed yourself, your family, food, clothing, or you've got stolen money and you're sending that out. But in either case, money needs to stay in the U.S. or your benefits need to be cut.
Bessent touched on potential cover-ups, saying there are evidently tapes of Attorney General Keith Ellison in meetings with people who donated to him.
Them calling for political favors to stop the investigations. So we'll see. But again, I don't want to get out ahead of the investigations. It's going to be very methodical. And Chris, I can guarantee you when the bear trap snaps, we're going to get these folks.
The Treasury Secretary says his interview was originally planned at the Minnesota State Capitol, but Governor Tim Walz refused to guarantee Bessent would be provided any police security.
He is afraid of what is coming, and he's not going to be able to hide behind this curtain because we will get there, and I don't have to go in the Capitol building to investigate him. I would love for him to come to Treasury and answer some questions. I can guarantee you that he will be safe and sound then, depending on what we discover. I don't know about his future.
Bessent also discussed an alleged bribery attempt.
One of the Somali fraudsters tried to bribe a juror with $120,000. Well, it turned out she'd been given $200,000 to bribe the juror, and she skimmed $80,000.
Bessent further warned that protests obstructing federal law enforcement appear coordinated and funded.
Someone is financing them. There are safe houses that when you see the 300 people with the same laser that they're using to blind DHS agents in courthouses in Portland, someone bought those lasers. And again, what we do is follow the money.
The Treasury Secretary talked about all the luxury cars and properties bought from Minnesota to East Africa.
How the hell did this happen? How did it happen? Like, President Trump is outraged. I'm outraged. The American people should be outraged.
The Treasury has announced that IRS civil enforcement teams are auditing financial institutions suspected of facilitating the laundering of Minnesota fraud proceeds. In addition, the IRS will soon launch a dedicated task force to work alongside criminal investigators and prosecutors to recover funds and prevent fraudulent nonprofits from exploiting federal programs. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A New York City Council employee was detained by ICE during a routine immigration appointment on Long Island yesterday. The Department of Homeland Security says he was there illegally and did not have work authorization. Council Speaker Julie Menin said the employee, a Venezuelan national, works as a data analyst and has a work visa. She called the detainment government overreach. DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin disputed those remarks and said he has a criminal record, including for assault. In a post on X, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani called the arrest an assault on democracy, on New York City, and on its values. He called for the employee's release and said he would continue to monitor the situation. Former President Bill Clinton could soon face contempt of Congress proceedings. The Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee says he's starting that process. That's after Clinton failed to attend a hearing this morning on sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Here's committee chair James Comer.
I think it's very disappointing. As a result of Bill Clinton not showing up for his lawful subpoena, which again was voted on unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
A spokesperson for the former president has said that Clinton knew nothing about Epstein's crimes. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has a similar deposition scheduled for tomorrow. Her attorney says she won't show up either. Lawyers for the Clintons are calling subpoenas from the committee invalid, saying they're not legally enforceable. The Supreme Court heard arguments over the legality of state laws that ban males from participating in female sports. The plaintiffs, males who identify as females, say the laws violate the Constitution. Joining us to discuss is Jonathan Houlihan, President and General Counsel of Remnant Law. Jonathan, good afternoon. Always good to have you on the show. To start off, can you tell us what is the Supreme Court exactly deciding in these cases and what it's not deciding?
Thanks, Don, for having me on. So these two cases are consolidated cases from, as you articulated, state bans on transgender athletes participating in women's sports. So one is from the state of Ohio from 2020, a ban that applied to high school and college sports teams, and then a West Virginia law 2021 that applied to females in high school. So what the Supreme Court is deciding is if these bans violate the Due Process Clause of the Constitution under the 14th Amendment, and also whether or not it violates Title IX, which it was put in place by Congress in 1972 to protect women's sports and also encourage women to participate and provide equal opportunity for women in sports leagues. So it's not deciding. It's not, while it has an impact, it's not going into the pronouns and all the other things that have been discussed in policy. It's really talking about women's sports. And is sex discrimination, does that apply to gender identity? That's the bottom line that your viewers need to understand. And there's wide-ranging effects on this. I mean, there's 27 states in the United States that have similar bans. So these are the first kind of cases that have reached the court, and that's what they're going to decide if sex discrimination applies to gender identity.
Okay, so thank you for explaining that. What are some of the core arguments? Can we hear that were made by Idaho and West Virginia?
Well, they really make the state bringing this challenge is that it's fundamentally unfair to have biological males competing with females. It takes away opportunities, scholarships, awards, all of those things that were encouraged with Title IX to get women to have more participation in sports and all the great things that come with sports, right? Like leadership opportunities, college opportunities, all these things that women gain from participating in sports. And they're arguing the fundamental fairness of allowing biological males to compete in these sports teams takes away those opportunities and undercuts the entire intent and congressional intent and what Congress meant on with the definition of biological sex when they passed Title IX.
Okay, you said earlier that this will impact 27 states. So what exactly would the impact be, and how consequential will this ruling be for women's sports?
Well, I mean, it could impact, depending on the ruling, it could impact. There's a couple differences. In the Idaho case, there's some testing that has to take place in the law, gender testing, and it's what the ACLU and Lambda Legal had cited as invasive. The West Virginia case doesn't have quite the invasiveness as alleged by the ACLU. but it could impact just the whole scheme of Title IX, the federal scheme of what is biological sex, what is sex discrimination. So if the Supreme Court says, yes, a ban on transgender athletes participating on women's sports team is discriminatory, it violates a due process clause, you're going to see a lot of those bans get dialed back, get challenged. You're going to see, in my opinion, you're probably going to see a lot of the practical effect is you'll just see a lot of women's sports teams. There's not going to be as many opportunities as there was before because it's too challenging to continually fight these Title IX complaints through the federal government. If there's another in the next administration, if the Department of Education seeks to enforce those bans. So you're going to see long-lasting effects on women's sports teams and those opportunities, which would be a real shame to young athletes and young women that seek sports for those opportunities for scholarships, leadership opportunities, and just teamwork and building character and all the things that comes with being on part of a sports team.
Okay, so if the Supreme Court says yes or no, how immediate would the impact on the states? What is the time difference between the ruling and actual effects on the ground?
Well, you'll see it'll be June of 26 before the decision is expected. So there's obviously going to be some lag time. And then what does that actually mean to the states? So there's going to be some lag time between what the ruling says and how it's applied, because each state may have written their law differently. For example, in West Virginia, they mirrored the language from Title IX, what they defined sex as, biological sex. So you're going to see some lag time depending on the states, but it could have a huge impact just on the overarching idea of how you define biological sex. So if the Supreme Court says gender identity falls in that category of sex discrimination, and you have transgender athletes that are participating and maybe they're banned currently from these sports, I mean, they're going to have to roll all those laws back, or at least they're going to be challenged. So it could have long-lasting impact on women's sports based on the ruling. My impression is, though, I mean, this was a long hearing, right? This was 3.5 hours with the two combined cases. There was a lot of discussion on Title IX. But the conservative judges, justices, they really seem to lean more towards deferring to the states, much like the Scrimetti case on gender on Scrimetti, which dealt with gender reassignment and all those medical things that occur with that, whether or not that's lawful. You're going to see in this case a little bit of a lag time, but either way, the conservative judges really seem to defer to the states. And my feeling is it'll be a 6-3 opinion, and they're going to uphold the bans just based on the body language, based on the questions. Justice Gorsuch, he really focused in kind of what I was talking about, those leadership opportunities, those scholarship opportunities lost, and the fundamental fairness that would be lost if these bans on transgender athletes was overturned.
Okay, just one last thing, Jonathan. Do you think the decision will be very black and white, for example, like either upholding the bans or striking them down? Or do you think we'll see something more nuanced in the language, a more specific ruling?
Well, it's in the ACLU and the Lambda Legal, they asked for that, actually. If the justices didn't uphold the ban, they asked for it at least to be sent down to develop facts further. One of the cases was an injunction. So you could see that if the bans are not upheld, you could see maybe send it back down for further development, maybe, as applied to, not due process, but as applied to Title IX claims. You could see a really nuanced claim, but at the end of the day, I think it's going to be they're going to uphold the bans, in my opinion. Either way, putting that definition of sex discrimination into Title IX or any kind of biological sex, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, Congress was clear when they passed Title IX in 1972 and the subsequent amendments. They were all talking about biological sex. So to recategorize gender identity into biological sex, it would be a very frustrating thing to unpack. Just from a policy perspective, you're going to have courts be arbitrators of hey, has this person taken enough hormones? Has this person, what does their testosterone look like? All of those kind of scientific testing things, it's unworkable in the court system. So you really have to have a clear definition and a demarcation of what that means. And biological sex, I mean, you were born a male or born a female, it's a pretty good indicator of that.
Well, I mean, that sounds like a good point to me. I'm not an expert, but really good to hear your insight today. Very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom, for having me on.
The Democratic National Committee is planning to spend millions of dollars on voter registration efforts. DNC Chair Ken Martin said his party has to do work to bring in new voters.
Well, it's really important to identify that we have a big challenge. There's a real crisis right now as it relates to voter registration in this country. Between 2020 and 2024, we actually lost about 2.1 million voters, Democratic voters, in terms of registration, and the Republicans gained around 2.4 million, right? And as a result, they have a significant advantage right now throughout the country over Democrats in terms of partisan voter registration. And so it's a crisis.
The DNC will kick off the initiative in Arizona and Nevada with at least $2 million for training organizers. The committee says its plan will focus on drawing in young people, people of color, and individuals without college degrees. The program will also coordinate national events and push state parties to compete to register new voters.
And I think one of the big lessons for us as Democrats is to make sure that we bring people into the conversation, right? And that means that we should focus in on the thing that connects everyone, right? Whether you're a farmer in southern Minnesota or a miner up on the Iron Range in northern Minnesota or a new refugee in the Twin Cities, the thing that connects all of them is the fact that they all believe in the American dream.
More than 15,000 pounds of drugs seized through busts in Venezuela. Today, the Venezuelan Interior Minister reported that they seized the drugs in the southern state of Bolivar. The minister said there was about 15,000 pounds of drugs, plus individual wrappings for marijuana and cocaine. He added that the 2 boats were also seized. The Interior Minister said the raids were part of Operation Soledad from earlier this month. To date, the minister says Venezuela has seized nearly 16,000 pounds of drugs. On your mark, get set. Tomorrow, registration opens up for the chance to score tickets for the Summer Games. The 2028 Olympic Games will be hosted by Los Angeles. Online LA28 says starting tomorrow, people can create a profile to enter the lottery ticket system. This is how people will get the chance to buy seats. Later this year, people will receive an email telling them if they snagged a time slot for tickets. The San Francisco Chronicle is reporting that tickets to individual events will start at $28. The majority of the events will take place in the Westwood area near downtown Los Angeles, as well as neighboring cities Inglewood, Venice, and Long Beach. Lawmakers examined the role of offensive cyber capabilities to deter U.S. adversaries like the Chinese Communist Party from targeting U.S. critical infrastructure. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has more.
Lawmakers have recently been made aware that the Chinese Communist Party targeted them and Congress. Congressmen during a hearing today examining new strategies to deter malign actors like the Chinese Communist Party.
The Chinese state-sponsored cyber actor known as Salt Typhoon compromised email systems used by staff supporting several congressional committees. These actors are not criminals acting for profit. They are instruments of state power, and that needs to be underscored.
Democratic lawmakers urged restraint in the use of offensive cyber capabilities and called for greater investment in defensive cyber capabilities and the use of sanctions to deter malign actors.
Cyber offense is no substitute for defense and resilience. Second, cyber offense is one tool among many, including sanctions and other diplomatic levers that the United States can use. And finally, any significant change to our approach to the use of offensive cyber operations could shift global norms.
Experts from the private sector who are in the front lines of cyber warfare have endorsed a deterrence strategy based on the legal use of U.S. offensive cyber capabilities.
Deterrence requires credible offensive cyber operations that disrupt and impose cost upstream.
This may be uncomfortable culturally, but unavoidable strategically. Effective offensive cyber is not reckless. It is disciplined, tested, authorized, and aligned with government policy.
Washington has failed to establish deterrence in the cyber domain, and our adversaries right now control the escalation ladder. Historically, U.S. foreign policy has rested on deterrence, with implied escalation dominance in any domain. But that foundation has failed in the context of cyber.
Experts urge lawmakers to create a shift in mindset when it comes to the use of cyber capabilities.
It's really important to flip the risk calculus. The default answer to a proposed operation should be yes, and a naysayer should have to prove it is too risky instead of asking the operators to prove the operation is safe. Cyber tools can be very effective in disrupting an adversary. We saw some of this in Venezuela just recently, but operators need time to plan. This is not a tool that just sits on the shelf and you reach out and grab it when you need it. They need to be incorporated from the very early stages of planning.
Lastly, lawmakers were advised to create a cyber force, either a standalone branch of the armed services or within Special Operations Command. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland are expected to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Today's face-to-face comes amid President Donald Trump's push to take control of the Arctic island. The Danish foreign minister and his Greenlandic counterpart had been requesting the meeting. Trump first floated the idea of a U.S. takeover of Greenland in 2019 during his first term in office. The president has argued U.S. control of the Danish territory is necessary to counter threats from Russia and China. Denmark's defense minister said he would participate in a meeting with NATO's Secretary General in Brussels next week. Greenland's foreign minister is expected to attend the meeting as well. Iranian activists are calling on foreign leaders to support people protesting the Islamic regime. Pressure on the regime is increasing as international leaders keep calling for peace in Iran. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
Be our voice and don't support our governor.
An Iranian activist in Italy calling on foreign leaders to support the Iranian people and not the regime. Last week, the Iranian regime cut off its people from the outside world by shutting off the internet and phone services. The activist says the situation has gotten so bad that even doctors can't communicate with each other. That's despite hospitals being overrun, with reports saying around 2,000 people died during the protests so far.
They don't have connection between themselves. They cannot call the other doctors and helps to come to the hospital.
The United Nations is weighing in as well. A spokesperson for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights criticizes Iran's security forces for targeting protesters.
The killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labeling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable.
The foreign policy chief for the European Union says the Iranian regime could fall within a short period of time, similar to how the Assad regime in Syria fell recently. The EU plans to keep supporting the Iranian people.
We are also putting more sanctions on the ones who are using the violence against the peaceful protesters to show that we are condemning these actions.
She added that change in Iran primarily has to come from the Iranian people. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Staying in the Middle East, the Trump administration has designated 3 branches of the Muslim Brotherhood as terrorist organizations. The Treasury and State Departments announced the actions today affecting Muslim Brotherhood chapters in Lebanon, Jordan, and Egypt. The Trump administration said these organizations pose a risk to the U.S. and American interests. President Trump ordered the designation last month. The 3 branches and their members now face U.S. sanctions. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a statement, quote, "The United States will use all available tools to deprive these Muslim Brotherhood chapters of the resources to engage in or support terrorism." Jordan and Egypt have also banned the Muslim Brotherhood in their countries. The U.S. allies in the region, such as Qatar and Turkey, are more tolerant of the organization. New concerns over a cover-up linking the Chinese Communist Party with live organ harvesting may have surfaced. Last week, 2 screenshots from a chat group went viral on Chinese social media before they were censored. The content in the chat has alarmed many Chinese citizens. If true, It would be the latest indication that Chinese police and hospitals are conducting operations targeting people on the streets for organ harvesting. NTD's Flora Hua has the package.
The two screenshots quickly went viral after the author posted them on China's version of TikTok, Douyin, on Monday. After translating the messages into English, we dubbed the conversation for listeners.
She's buying durian at the fruit stand.
Tell XYZ and the others that once she finishes the purchase, they should detain her inside the apartment building and forcibly bring her back directly in an ambulance. Don't let her go home at all.
Okay.
Judging by her physique, her body fat percentage is likely high.
You guys want to take her?
Sure. The DNA anti-rejection tests have passed. Jilin University now has liver and kidney recipients.
Has the local police station been contacted?
I just finished contacting them.
When asked whether this means local police were involved in kidnapping the woman, the post author replied with a confirmation. What's more, the reference to Jilin University in the chat likely points to one of the university's two affiliated hospitals. A US-based human rights group that has investigated China's transplant industry for decades has listed both hospitals as highly suspected of engaging in large-scale live organ harvesting. The group was the first one to report that Falun Gong practitioners in China have been the primary target for their organs. The Chinese Communist Party has been brutally persecuting the faith group since 1999. But in recent years, the scale of organ harvesting victims appears to have grown, with increasing media reports of young people going missing in China. Now, both the screenshots and the whistleblower's Douyin account have been completely removed from the platform by Chinese regulators. The censorship has only made the claims more convincing to many, but the story has still left digital footprints. Search records on the platform, such as "What happened to the woman kidnapped?" show that many users tried to learn the fate of the woman mentioned in the chat. Flora Hua, NTD News.
The competition for the 2028 Olympic Games starts tomorrow, but not for athletes, for any possible spectators who want to watch the games. Lottery ticket registration starts tomorrow. More news after.